So this is my static E46. This is actually my second phase of this car with this camber and these wheels. I didn't even show the first setup that I did. I showed the rear springs, installing that, but I really didn't go into depth. Now this second phase here, I was supposed to film everything about how I did that setup. Actually on to phase 3 now, and now I've already done a lot of stuff to the car, uninstalling fenders, uninstalling hoods, and I've changed a lot of stuff. I pulled the tent, pulled the banners. Now I've changed a lot, fixed a couple dents, but before I go ahead and really dive into phase 3, I want to just go over phase 2 because I feel like it's a really achievable setup. Now let's go ahead and start with the front of the car, starting with the wheels and how I got the camber. As you can see, I'm tucking pretty low on the front fender here. Now the tires are aired out, but more or less it was pretty much at this height. These wheels in the front, the specs are 18 by 10.5 plus 22. They're ESR style SR05, something like that. The plus 22, the 10.5 plus 22, the offset was actually too positive. In order to even mount these up without even camber, in order to mount these up, I had to put a 20 mil spacer, so that makes the offset plus 2. So 10.5 plus 2 is how you can mount these. If you go with something in similar spec, it'll give you an idea of what you can run and can't run. Now lowering the car, I'm on max speeding rods in the front. I still have the springs. It's the adjustable coilovers in the front. I have everything maxed out. The bottom shock mount spun up all the way. The end link is bottomed out on top of that, and the spring holder is sitting on top of that, so that everything's touching, no preload, and the car's just sitting down on top of that. As you can see, everything's maxed out here. I don't know if max speeding rods makes the coilovers like this anymore, but if they do, this is how I'm running it. This is how I've had it for quite a while. Now, the end link that I'm using for this car is actually from a 2012 Impala SS. And that is because that end link is a lot shorter. When you slam the car, the location of the end link mount is in a different location. So the OEM is a lot longer, and I found some forums that said I could use a 2012 Impala SS end link. Alright, so that's how I lowered the car. I'm gonna go ahead and show you the top hat. As you can see, I'm running the SLR camber plates. Now, most drift cars or someone that may be using this to counter the camber from a angle kit will run this, but for cambered cars you can actually run this backwards. You can choose any mounting thread holes that you want to use on the top hat, configure it the way you want it, drill new holes in the shock tower, and now once you've mounted that up, you can kind of go ahead and figure out how much camber you want. And once doing that, what I did, you can grab a hole saw and drill the shock tower where you need the top of the shock to come out through. Now, in order to get this low and to get this static, I had to delete the divorce setup, right? So I had to get rid of the spring bucket and the spring. And once you get rid of that, you have to replace it with an adjustable arm, and that'll actually help you get the camber that you need, as well as the lower control arm. The rear camber is running around -10, -11, and the front is around -8. Now this 10.5 was super wide, super hard to fit. Actually, it rubbed on the shock pretty good, and it's worn down enough to where it clears. These fenders are actually completely shaved out. I have a video on that. I shaved the lips out completely, so there's nothing there. With that, I high radius the quarters. I cut out the inner sheet metal and left the outer. That way the wheel would not rub on that, because it was. Now, just to say this again in case I forgot it, this is 18 by 10.5 plus 22 in the back, so it's a squared setup. But in the back, I have a 15 mil spacer. That makes the offset plus 7. Also, if I forgot to mention, this is a 225/35 on a 10.5. Now I did roll this corner just a little bit here. That way the corner of the wheel and the rim would actually fit. So just a slight roll of the fender. If I can get a good angle. That's the lower control arm, the blue one. And the orange one is the upper control arm that replaced the spring bucket. And as you can see, in order for me to run this arm, I had to notch this out. Okay, now for the shock, this is max speeding rods. This part is spun up all the way as much as it could go, maxed out, locked, and the washers I'm running, let's count, it's 17 and 2 nuts. One of the other things that I added to this car when I did the true rear setup was I added a X-brace, a chassis X-brace in here to help reinforce the shock towers, because when you do the true rear setup, the shock towers become very weak because all of the weight of the car is sitting on the shock towers. So this is the PureTech Sweden X-brace. This X-brace cost me about $700. There is cheaper options. This is one of the most expensive ones. Parts Shop Max makes one for around $400. I think I pretty much covered everything. I showed how I got the camera in the back with the rear uppers and the lowers. I shaved out the quarters completely in the back, rolled the corners, that way the corner of the wheel would fit and not rub. High radius the inner sheet metal of the rear, so there's only the outer sheet metal. Now the front is just max speeding rods, maxed out everything. It does actually have preload. Then SLR camber plates flipped, 2012 Impala SS in links. The rest of it's pretty much stock, and I really don't think it was that much money to put this together. Now in the back I was running like double-digit camber, maybe 10 or 11. I started cracking wheels once I got into double digits. I actually cracked both the back wheels. The fronts have done okay. They're at like -8, -9, and that is maxed out, including the back. So both are maxed out. I've had no issues in the front. Now I can go over parts that I spent. I won't include wheels because that's just going to determine on what kind of wheels you have or you want. Now for the rear uppers from Parts Shop Max, I spent about $280, $300 for those. The rear lowers are eBay, so they're about 40, 50 bucks. And then the front SLR camber plates was about $280 to $300 as well. The end links were $40 maybe. That's pretty much it. I think that's the biggest cost in terms of like doing this setup with the camber, not including wheels or tires, like I said. You will also have to buy coilovers. These are pretty cheap. They're max speeding rods. Unless you have them already, then you're already set. But if you're wanting to go from a regular slam static car to a big cambered car, these are the parts that I used to do that mainly. Now it did involve quite a lot of work to do all the work in the back, cutting out the frame, that notch, high radiusing the fenders, shaving all that down. Even the front, figuring out where the top hat needs to mount, drill holes, and cutting out the big bolt in the center. I mean, I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments and I'll try and get back with you. Thanks for watching.